And so now I'm using my iPhone mini, iPhone 12, which is, I think it's got a good lens. It does a good job. So that's what this is. That's what this test is. But actually, I want to talk about the shutter speed on a camera. This is lesson 2 for my friend who's applying for a job. It looks like the camera is maybe a little bit crooked. Anyway, I'm not doing a lot of production quality here right now, just average quality. Joking. Anyway, so shutter is the thing that you can hear when you push the button. It goes click or clunk, or sometimes the shutter itself will be turned off so you don't hear any sound when it goes. It's the electronic shutter. And what it does is it's a slit, very, very narrow slit that goes from the bottom of the picture to the top of the picture, or from the bottom of the sensor, more precisely, to the top of the sensor, or it goes the other way, it goes down. So there will be an arm that comes down, and a tiny, tiny microsecond, nanosecond later, another arm will come down, and that will expose the sensor to a little slit. So imagine your first finger and your second finger a little bit separated, and you look through that, and that's what comes down over the sensor, and that exposes the picture. So the shutter is the thing that determines the speed with which the sensor is exposed to light, exposed to the all-important light that we were talking about earlier. And the light will be exposed up and down, or down and up, it doesn't really matter. There are older film cameras where the shutter would actually go sideways. So there's Copal square and focal plane shutter. Digital cameras typically go up and down. And those ones, it has less distance to travel, which means it's exposing the shutter to light for less time than going across. So a thousandth of a second going across the shutter, across the sensor, would take longer than longer thousandths of a second than it would be to go down, because the sensor is not a square, it is a rectangle. 35 millimeters in diameter, more or less. So the shutter has, what it does, it determines how much you will be able to stop action or stop your hand shaking if you are taking pictures of moving things, or if you are have difficulty holding the camera still while you are doing things. So the ability to hold the camera still in low light is a good skill, but normally you would want to increase the shutter speed, as I mentioned earlier, to double the speed, double the focal length of your lens. So if you have a 50 millimeter lens, you would want to be able to shoot at 100th of a second. Now this brings us to the next question that I was talking about earlier, was the f-stop on the lens. The f-stop on the lens is the thing that allows you to get more light in. The smaller the number, the more light that gets in through the aperture. Then the other thing you have to control it, as I mentioned earlier, is the ISO or the DIN, which is the ISO or the ASA, or the DIN, that's another word they use, that controls the sensitivity. So using these 3 items, you get to get the perfect exposure within the realm of the amount of light that you have. And balancing the shutter speed lets you control the amount of sharpness and blurriness of the picture. For example, if you want to have a bicyclist come by and you want to show that he's moving quickly, you will use a slower shutter speed. If you want to stop the bicyclist in action as he's coming by, you will use something in a fast shutter speed, maybe around 1,000 or 2,000th of a second. Old film cameras typically wouldn't go any faster than a thousandth of a second. That was pretty darn fast back then. Most digital cameras these days will go up to 4 thousandths of a second or more. And that really lets you stop things like waterfalls or fountains or even cars going by really quickly. So you have to think of it as a triangle. The triangle for photography is the aperture on one corner, the speed of the shutter in the other corner, and the sensitivity of the sensor or the ISO the other corner. And how you control those things allows you to get a perfect exposure. What is a perfect exposure? Good question. Perfect exposure is the thing that allows you to get the right amount of light so that you can see shadow detail, and you can see highlight detail, and you can have a perfect black and a perfect white in the picture. Now, having said all of that, that's what is considered to be the technical perfect photograph. Then you have other things like composition and all those other things that come into play when you're trying to deal with what kind of picture to take. So that's the technical side of photography. That's all I'm going to say. See you later.